Well, good morning. I'm still Philip Crum, show citizen and co-founder of AMP, along with Kathleen Mills, licensed professional counselor supervisor on the other side of your screen there. And this is the Therapy Disruptors podcast. You wanted to talk just a little bit before Dr. Carrie Madej joins us about the guidance document that Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council distributed back on March 13th to all 95,000 of its licensees. And I have assumed the content and discussion path that you wanted to pursue and put a couple notes here together. So I'm going to jump right in and see what you think. First of all, let me ask you the initial request of the Texas Attorney General back a year and a half ago was to find out whether Texas mental health counselors uh, qualified as healthcare providers. The phrase healthcare providers. If they did, then the laws that were passed in question here applied to mental health care licensees. If they are not healthcare providers, then the law does not. Paxton's ruling came down and said that council licensees are healthcare providers. So here's the question. If we're healthcare providers, why did BHEC feel the need to send out a 4-page document that explains why the law applies to counselors?
Well, BHEC initiated the original letter to the Attorney General of Texas to get that clarification. The clarification was done very succinctly with Ken Paxton's reply in February, at which point BHEC needed to relay that information to the 95,000 therapists in the state of Texas. So it's
Mhm.
no longer, in my mind, the letter that BHEC wrote in March was the clarification as it pertains to our license in the state of Texas based on the state statutes that have been codified in the Texas law books.
It's the law of the land. In fact, on page 3, interpretation of Texas Health and Safety Code, Chapter 161, it says 3 bullet points. And the first one is council licensees are healthcare providers, in quotes, under subchapter Y, the relevant code. So it's very plain. It's right there. Anybody saying that it doesn't apply to licensees hasn't read page 3 yet.
Well, they're even looking at that, Philip, and acknowledging that it's not there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the emperor has no clothes and we're still going to pretend, right? So, it's stunning, actually.
If you read this short 4-page document, it is written in a manner that is explaining to people, yes, this does apply to us, as if somebody has said it does not. This is not simple, cut and dry. Yes, it does. Here it is. Thank you very much. This is written to combat somebody who said that it does not. Let's talk about what's very clear. What is clear in this document as far as what's prohibited by the law? On page 2, in section 2, overview of chapter 161, it says that the subchapter prohibits certain procedures. This is the newly codified law, prohibits certain procedures and treatments for minors, to include surgery to alter the child's sex, puberty blockers, and cross-sex hormones. So hormones, puberty blockers, and surgery are explicitly and expressly prohibited. No question. There we go. I don't know how you can make it any more clear than that, is my point.
Well, just remember, Philip, that the counselors were responsible or charged with the actual assessment required by these doctors to get the hormone, puberty blocker surgery, that kind of stuff. We were the chosen gatekeepers to write the one-time, one-session letter, give it to the medical doctor to get things started. That really needs to sink in. The process to get to the puberty blockers and the hormones and everything that follows was at the doorstep of therapists.
All roads to physical transitioning lead through the mental health field. All right, so let's move on to what is not as crystal clear, and that leads directly into the term facilitate. The term, I'm going to read you exactly what it says, and then you comment on this. The term facilitate is not defined in subchapter Y, but for purposes of this guidance, facilitation is interpreted consistent with its commonly understood meaning. Any action by a licensee that assists, enables, or contributes to a minor's access to a procedure or treatment prohibited under section blah, 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 Texas Health Septica. This includes conduct undertaken under a Texas license for the purpose of enabling a minor to obtain such procedures or treatments, regardless of where the procedure or treatment ultimately occurs. So that last sentence is all about where. In other words, you can't send somebody to another, you can't prep them, write a letter, and send them to Oklahoma to get the surgery or wherever.
Enable is a great word. And if counselors are going to consistently deny the meaning of what enabling means, then the alcohol and addiction recovery is out the window. So
Hmm.
counselors do enable, facilitate through letter writing. That's an example. Or affirming gender identity. That is facilitating. It's called grooming. It's similar to the flags that you see in classrooms by teachers, similar to the library with a drag queen reading kindergartners a little bedtime story or something, similar to what schools do. They do the parade thing, right? With little kids. That's facilitating, that's enabling, that is grooming or
Grooming.
suggestive kinds of curriculum. All of it is enabling. So for someone to suggest that counselors don't do that is kind of ludicrous, because we're at the gatekeep, we're at the epicenter of this whole thing.
Right. Right. Well, in the last sentence here is talking about the conduct that's been outlawed for the purpose of enabling a minor to obtain such procedures or treatments, regardless of where the procedure or treatment ultimately occurs. So the where is discussed, the when is left open. So if you're talking to, pick an age, a 13-year-old who can't legally do this in Texas until they're 18, and they're talking to a counselor between 13 and 18, and the counselor is using pronouns, cross dressing, new names, all the trappings that are not explicitly discussed in the bill. Granted, they're not specifically discussed in the bill. What would you call that? Sounds like grooming, getting somebody ready for something.
Not treating the actual whatever's going on inside. Again, it's the affirmation by what you just listed there, Philip. Now, it's very clear, it would be very clear in a court of law that those 5 years, let's say 13 to 18, before anything can be done. I mean, don't think that just because somebody turns 18, that therapist who saw them from 13 to 17, and on, isn't going to suffer some sort of ramification civil lawsuit, because this is the gatekeeper, this is the grooming, this is the facilitation. And in a court of law, it's going to be very well demonstrated that those 5
Yeah.
years set up that particular person for something they will never be able to
Mhm.
recover from if they go through with the
Let's talk about
transition
ethics.
thing.
On the subject of ethics, there's a bullet point here. BIEC is making on page 3 of the document under Section 4, treatment not implicated by the statute. One of the bullet points they make is on ethics compliant clinical documentation. And they say documentation necessary for continuity of care, provided it is not intended to facilitate prohibited procedures. And they go on to say structuring a treatment plan intended to advance a minor's eligibility for procedures or treatments prohibited under Section 161702. Now, those two statements made me think about the 3-hour course you just took a few weeks ago. Tell me a little bit about that. What was your takeaway there?
My take was, why are you having this class? Because you're assuming that clients and therapists are no longer safe. So basically, I took a 3-hour ethics course for how to circumvent the law by doing case notes in a certain innocuous way. So my takeaway from the 3-hour CEU was, they know that this is illegal. And so now you're going to start seeing people doing case note ethics about how to rewrite your case notes so they won't get in trouble. The counselor won't get in trouble. So there is a violation of ethical duty. You're going to manipulate the case notes, which that's not what I was trained to do.
On the subject of evidence-based, on page 3, BHEC says licensees should exercise caution and ensure that clinical decision-making is informed by a careful review of available empirical evidence, applicable law, and professional standards of care. That's a whole conversation. Who gets to determine what these professional standards of care is? That's a mess right now. They say licensees should not rely solely on advocacy materials, policy statements, or position papers that may intermix scientific assertions with policy or political perspectives, and that would include our materials, which is fine because our blog posts and position statements on matters that are in the gray zone are just exactly that. We're talking today about what's concrete and what is in the gray zone and why some of that stuff in the gray zone should be considered not so gray, especially if you get to court. And would you risk your
Well,
license on
there's
that?
already been legal court case wins for things, whether you're camouflaging things or not.
Mhm.
When you're in a civil lawsuit, everybody's named in it. So the case gets really strong. So the court has already rendered several wins for detransitioners who are adults now. And the counselors who wrote the letter bared the majority of the settlement. The lawsuit dollars from psychotherapists or counselors, mental health professionals bared the most of the settlement
Yeah, they bore the brunt of the settlement.
because the counselor recommended that they go ahead and start it. Do you see how this works? So what's happening is that the
Mhm.
doctors are now blaming the mental health professionals. They can because they were the ones who trusted the expert letter to come into their doorstep. So they went, okay, well, this sounds okay. So we're just going to start the whole process.
Yeah. First guy in line gets thrown under the bus. BIEC goes on to say in their disclaimer, licensees seeking further clarification should consult a trusted colleague or the individual responsible for addressing professional practice questions within any local, state, regional, or national professional association of which the licensee is a member. Think about that. Consult a trusted colleague. That means in your Facebook group is what that means. Or somebody at a professional association, yeah, like ACA or TCA, who's not following scientific guidance and they're still promoting gender affirming care, even though it's been outlawed in Texas. What could possibly go wrong? Violations may subject a licensee to disciplinary action by the council. Number two, the new law authorizes the Attorney General to bring an enforcement action to restrain violations of Subchapter Y and to seek applicable civil remedies. Now, if this law does not apply to mental health licensees, why is BHEC telling you you could possibly lose your license and the Attorney General could come after you if you don't
Well,
follow that
again,
law?
I'm going to go back to my original statement here, Philip. BHEC is the one who initiated this based on Senate Bill 14. BHEC is the one who needed legal clarification. Are mental health counselors in the state of Texas considered healthcare providers? They needed that clarification because they are bound to following the state statutes in the state of Texas. That's what BHEC is supposed to do. So they did the right thing. They got Ken Paxton's reply. And then the statement that BHEC issued on March 13th is the clarification. Here's the stunning awareness for all counselors. BHEC is supporting Ken Paxton's opinion based on the state statutes that have already been codified. They were very specific in this March 13th, 2026 letter to all 95,000
Mhm.
counselors. They have to abide by the law. This is not an opinion anymore. And they clarified the state statutes.
Nevertheless, several people are going to have to lose their license before the rest of them get the message. I'm going to go see if I can
Mm,
find Carrie Madej,
yes,
let her in, and then we're gonna talk to her for a while. So if that works for
that
you,
works
then
for
we'll
me.
be right back.
Okay.
We're back with the ladies. Dr. Carrie Madej has joined us, and Kathleen Mills, LPCS, is still here. So, good morning, Dr. Madej. How you doing?
I'm doing great. And how are both of you?
Perfect.
We've been discussing
Mhm.
some Texas
Yep.
stuff here before we got started with you. So we're all
Okay.
revved up and ready to go. Kathleen's been
Mhm.
looking forward to this for quite
Mhm.
a while. She always looks forward to talking to you. So, Kathleen, you've got a list of things you want to go through. But I guess before we get started, we ought to tell people who Carrie Madej is. Actually, I'd like to get you to do that, Carrie, if you would. Your
Sure. Yeah.
voice your preferred intro and make sure you explain what a DO is as opposed to an MD for those of us who might not know.
Okay. So I graduated from an osteopathic medical school in Kansas City in 2001. And osteopathy and allopathic, they're quite similar. It's just the philosophy of how we were trained is different. We believe in treating the body, mind, and spirit, that all three are integral with health. And we believe the body can heal itself inherently and has the wisdom and the knowledge to do that. We believe that structure and function are interrelational. So we study the body and the structure more and learn how to use our hands to diagnose, but also do something called manipulation, similar to a chiropractor, but different. But these days, it's become more like allopathic medicine. I was trained in osteopathic and allopathic. So I ended up becoming internal medicine physician on my own clinic, taught medical students, medical director, and did all of the traditional things. But then when I realized that we were being lied to on many fronts, and I know your listeners understand this, that's when I started to search for causes, and that's when my eyes were wide open to what was going on in the world. So that leads us up to now, because I started to speak out in 2020 on the public forum and social media, warning people about the shots they falsely call vaccines, and also something called transhumanism.
Which is segueing into the title of this particular podcast, Dr. Madej, and we've got some questions to kind of go through it. But I've always wondered, since we're in this gender affirming care nightmare, is gender affirming care a form of transhumanism? Why or why not? And what counselors need to be aware of if that is part of this whole thing. I've always thought it's transhumanism, but I would really love your opinion about that as ha- during our time today. So I'm going to
Yeah.
start with if you could tell a little story about what you saw in the medical field. You started researching the gain of function infections. Walk me through that a little bit.
Mhm. So I probably, like most of you, say, how did I get here? Like, this was not how I envisioned my life to be at this very moment in time. But, sometimes God puts us in the right place at the right time. And so mine started in med school in Kansas City. I happened to have a microbiology professor, and she worked for the military at one time, or maybe currently. I don't know. But at the time, she was telling us about the most evolved organisms. Now I know that's a code word for gain of function. So she happened to be working on the one that's used most around the world, called Mycoplasma pneumoniae. It's actually the skeleton for the other gain of functions that's being used. And it's very important to know this one for psychiatry and psychology, by the way. I'll get into that. So she was showing us her work. So she was very proud of herself. So thank goodness for that, because she showed us images, and that caught my attention. And she was telling us pretty much most evolved organisms, gain of function, are very weak. They're not made like, wild type, like nature. So they're not really virulent on their own. What makes them really pathogenic to a human or any host is the toxin that's with them. So I learned that. So she actually showed us the pictures of the toxin that piggybacks on this organism. So when she showed us the pictures, I raised my hand, and I never ask questions, but I did this time. I said, "Oh, is that a drawing of the neurotoxin?" And she says, "No." I said, "No, you misunderstood me. That has to be a cartoon." And she goes, "No." And our entire class was in uproar, because this was 2001. I'm sorry, not 2001. This was 1998. Sorry, 1998. So when this happened, we didn't even have cell phones. So we couldn't imagine something that looked like a crystalline robotic structure was on the red blood cell. This was not organic. This was not from nature. this was obviously something created, but we couldn't fathom it in our minds. So she got very angry that we realized what was going on. And she said, "You will all forget what I showed you. You will never speak about this again. You will never work again," and threatened us. And so we talked a little bit about it later, but what are we going to do about it, right? So I filed that away in my memory bank until there became an outbreak that was very difficult to treat in Metro Atlanta around my clinic and the others. And so, it wasn't being treated with the normal azithromycin, et cetera. So I'm like, oh, maybe let me do the latest research on it. And I'm like, huh, it's like 20 years of the research just took out and missing from the web. Like that's curious. So I started to research more and realize, oh, it's really gain of function. It's a bioweapon. Oh. And then I realized that many researchers aren't alive anymore who were assigned to that. And I'm like, oh, I'll close my laptop. But I did do one more part of the research. I said, I remembered what my professor taught us about it's really the neurotoxin you have to take care of. So I tried to find those images because many research articles, they said these are the images of the neurotoxin. Every single one was X'd out, blanked out, crossed out, gone. So then I really knew that I stumbled into something that the entities didn't want me to know. So I just closed my laptop. And so, but that gave me enough information to brainstorm. And I ended up using something called cholestyramine powder off label, which is used in mold toxins, neurotoxins. So, giving that to the people, it actually worked to bind this neurotoxin, remove it, and then they were able to recover. So, knowing about mycoplasma as a bioweapon totally changed my world because I began to see how the public health department was involved, the CDC got involved, calling me personally, calling the patients, all kinds of things, following this very carefully. And at some point, not just that one, but with tick illnesses, they told me and others to stop testing for it. They didn't need the data out there. And they told us to stop treating patients. So don't be a good doctor. In other words, they didn't want the information out there. So that's when my eyes became really opened to what did I just stumble into and how do I get out of it? You get out of it by pretending like it didn't happen and not treating patients and just becoming a drone. That's how you get out of it. But I couldn't because people were so sick. And this causes Gulf War syndrome. This causes neurologic issues. This causes a lot of mental issues, a lot. Um, this causes arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, cancers. You name it, this thing has been behind it. And there's been a lot of military research on it too. And so this goes into the psychology of it as well. In the old research, it says this organism that carries the toxin on it, it actually doesn't become activated. It's inert. It doesn't become activated until a trauma happens to the person. And they actually mention psychological trauma. Is that interesting? So this kind of explains why all of this we call all this psychological trauma started happening before the advent of COVID because remember they were that's when the gender disorientation was really hitting everybody. That's when the racial wars were really upping, gaining more momentum, the critical race theory going on. So all of this psychological warfare and the fear, right? You're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die. So they needed to do that psychological warfare before they launched any of their bioweapons because they need us to be in fear for it to work. So that was one of my big points I wanted to let everyone know is that fear is necessary for any of this stuff to work. We shouldn't really be in fear, and we should practice not being in fear because that is actually listed in military research as being part of the formula for making a bioweapon work. It's very fascinating to me. And also, I was disgusted, as you probably all are, knowing that these things that are around, that there's been a plan for the world and they're using this on their own population. Now, mycoplasma has been sprayed on the population in the past. by admission by our own government, just to see what would happen. They've also sprayed something called Serratia marcescens too, just to see what would happen. And so these are gain of function. And now we know the tick illnesses are gain of function, meaning they're created and now there are boxes of ticks being dropped everywhere. So we have really a war coming against the people, and it affects us in many different ways. But just know that there's always a solution, and that there's always God, and that our minds and our spirits definitely can overcome the physical body here. So there is always hope, and there's always a way, and just letting people know that. But that's my introduction to gain of function. I didn't mean to get into it. I didn't purposely plan to study it. It just came to me. And I didn't want to not treat my patients, so I continued my work with them, but I did everything properly, crossed every T, dotted every I, and I got an onslaught though from that point forward, because these government entities known as Public Health Department, CDC, and a national investigator just were following these cases, wanting me not to treat them, wanting me not to diagnose them, even though I checked all the boxes. They just didn't want the data out for anyone to know about this. They were also curious at the time. One of the researchers called me, well, one from the CDC and then one from the national investigator, saying, "How are you able to clear this mycoplasma out of the body?" Because I would get post labs as well. And I just, I didn't tell them directly. I didn't want them to know to stop, the one off-label medication that I was using. But I put everything in my chart. I just didn't directly tell them how I was using it. So cholestyramine powder can be used for cholesterol, binding cholesterol, and also irritable bowel. And everybody has a little bit of those. So that's how I could put it in the chart. So I didn't lie about anything. They'd had to figure it out themselves. So as things went on, I saw tick illness all of a sudden becoming introduced in the population. It wasn't just me, infectious disease doctors saw it as well. There was a day it started, a day it stopped. My med students were seeing this too. My med students started to get a little freaked out. There was a Rocky Mountain spotted fever, a tick illness outbreak in October of 2008 in the middle of an ice storm in metro Atlanta. It can't be from ticks, right? And they checked every box. Now, they weren't some were in the hospital, some weren't. But anyhow, the labs proved that this is what these people had. And there was just an outbreak in certain areas. I'll tell you that one of those patients I had, the CDC went to their home with hazmat suits on. This is no joke. The patients told me this. Went to their creek, took samples, went back, didn't say a word to them. They called the CDC and they wouldn't talk to them. Another two of them were called by the CDC. So this all happened in Metro Atlanta, which was very surreal. And I had two infectious disease doctors tell me, you should probably move out of the state. I didn't at the time. I ended up later, but not at the time. I did realize that this was a testing period, a trial, the CDC's it's their backyard. So let's test and tune. Which one will we use on the population at large? That's pretty much what I realized what was happening. And then I started to read in more into something Rima Libo, Dr. Libo posted about the Codex Alimentarius, which goes along with the World Health Organization and trade agreements and how to control the population, one world order, one seed bank, and modify and control all the vitamins and minerals and plants, that kind of thing. This is a psychopathic operation, right? So I saw all this happening and I'm like, what do I do with this? I didn't know. I did the best I could until I couldn't practice anymore because of the pressures. And a lot of my colleagues were not alive. This was in 2015. So I had a warning by someone high up, and I had a plan already. So I went to the Dominican Republic, did some medical missionary work, went back and forth to treat some patients, and was traumatized over this, and saw many of my colleagues die. And I said, God, why do I know this? Why am I here? I'm sure like all of us do. And it was in 2020. I remember learning about COVID and seeing the lockdowns. And then I realized when I saw the word vaccine, I saw the ingredients. And then I realized what was going to, what they were trying to do. I cried for a while, mourned, but then I got a righteous anger. And then I realized all the things that I went through for a purpose and a plan. And that's when I started to warn and educate others. I did my due diligence, followed the money trail, and then I ended up doing a 20-minute video that went viral. And I didn't think I would be the one speaking about it. I thought somebody would be better qualified than me, but it didn't appear that many people were coming forward. So I ended up being one of the people first talking about the warning of this genetic modification, transhumanism. These shots are not what you think they are, bioweapons, and that sort of thing. So I know that's a lot
I
of heavy
you know,
talk.
you attended a meeting, before COVID about that revealed plans for transhumanism. I kinda wanna segue into this because it's
Yeah.
all on this path of the human 2.0 agenda. So talk about that meeting you attended that revealed plans of transhumanism.
So there were some sympathetic individuals in higher up levels that I had taken care of. And they said, it's a shame this is happening to you with, getting pressured by the CDC, public health department, because my patients knew. And they said, but perhaps you should consider joining some groups like Chamber of Commerce because they could be protection in a way. And I thought, oh, that's nice. I thought it was just a normal chamber of commerce. But I did have to go through some rigorous background checks and interviews, and people had to refer me, um, and I was accepted. So I went to one meeting, and again, it was probably another divine appointment, the most important meeting that I went to. And so this was very curious. It was in November 2014, around there. And we were bussed into the location. Nobody could drive. And people there were much bigger than me. They were from CNN and Georgia Tech and Delta, things like that. And all of us were bussed in. Doors were locked at the location and cell phones were jammed. So I'm like, this is not a normal meeting. I got nervous. I wanted to get out of the building and I went to the bouncers at the door and they laughed. They unchained the door and they let me out, but I didn't have a car and my phone wouldn't work. So I had to go back in. So I sat down at the table. There's probably 1,500 people or so. And I talked to the people at the table. They knew I was new and they asked what I did. And I said, I'm a physician. And they laughed. They said, oh, you're no good to us. Why are you here? I said, I'm sorry. And they said, well, we are going to need you. Our bodies are going to change. I said, And I kind of dismissed that. This person doesn't know what they're talking about. So the main event started, the talk, and they said this purpose of that particular meeting was to address some issues that business owners of Metro Atlanta had with getting new businesses from outside of the state, particularly outside the country. They were having trouble for three reasons. That these companies felt that the people of Metro Atlanta were not very bright. They needed to improve the education. Number two, they were too racist. Number three, they were not amenable to new cultures. So, how do they solve this problem quickly? Well, there's a physician, Dr. Gupta, that worked for CNN for a while. He was on the stage and he said, I have a solution. And he took credit for this. He said, we can make people healthier. If they're healthier mentally, he's not using a holistic view. If they're healthier mentally, they'll be healthier physically. We have data on this. So this was going to solve at least some problems that business owners have. We can help them become better to each other, nicer people by not lying. And people who don't lie are healthier physically too. We know this by research. So that's how he introduced it. And he said, it's a technology that is going to monitor the parameter of lying. And he said, so let me just give you an example, and that'll explain it better than me going through the scientific data. So this is the example he gave us. He said, imagine two people talking on a phone, Susie and Brenda. Susie calls Brenda, says, Brenda, you're late for dinner. Where are you? And she doesn't want to tell her that she's drinking a little bit at the bar. She was like, oh, I'm just running late at the gym. She tells a white lie. Well, there is going to be, they said, in the near future, a synthetic substance inside the human body that will wirelessly connect us all to our smart devices. It could be this example was the health app on the phone, and everybody has one on a smart device, even if it's not on your screen, even if you deleted it, it still runs in the background. So they have these parameters they would like to monitor on us, and it will catch you lying. Okay. So the phone's app would know that Brenda was lying immediately because of her location. Makes sense. Her heart rate was sedentary. It's measuring her vital signs, but also voice inflection. Knows immediately she's lying. Electrodermal analysis, sweat glands on the fingertips, like a polygraph test of the police station. They said it's on par. Also know that she's drinking alcohol because of the blood alcohol content was elevated. Would know what drugs she's taking, like prescription drugs. Lot number, batch number, that's specific. This is what they said they can do. I'm not telling you it's going to happen. I'm telling you what they're saying. They know some other disturbing things like fertility. And if you look at the Apple iPhone app, it's very disturbing. They actually know sexual activity, they claim. This is very disturbing to me. They know if you fall down, they know what kind of nutrients are being taken up in the body. So this was all explained. And you must know that I was the most shocked person in the room. Okay. Because you're talking just nonchalant and everybody was used to this. So as he was saying that the phone would know that she was lying, he said this. He said, now the woman, Brenda, will be given an instant repercussion. He says she will have a shock given to her. He said, literally said that. When we all gasped in the room, he said, okay, you don't like that word. I'll use the word buzz. Do you feel more comfortable with that? He never elaborated to what that was. We can hypothesize. Maybe it's a little bit of an electrical stimulation. I don't think it's like a shock. It could just be a release of a chemical, right? A drug, a peptide, a hormone, who knows? So then he said after 3 months, all those lies would be added up because now there's no human involved. It's just a computer system, algorithm, right? So every lie is the same. If you steal something, is the same as telling that white lie about running late. And so if this person lied too much, she would have a bad social credit score and she wouldn't have a good, place to live. She wouldn't be able to travel, school, all this stuff. And so these people had a standing ovation in the room. And I was very upset at this. I said, how could you stand for this to the people at my table? Goes against God. And they said, yeah, it's a little inhumane, but you don't understand that what's about to happen is going, to be around the world and you can't stop it. No one can stop it. So it's either us or them. And you're going to want to be on our side. And even if you go outside the big cities and be a doctor for those people, you're going to run back to us. We guarantee it. And I said, never.
Why did someone think that you would be happy to be part of this group?
It's still a mystery to me. I can tell you one of the women that referred me, she had a good heart. And I think that she wanted me to see what was going on. I think some people thought it would be good to be on their side, to influence. They had certain people in certain communities to influence. And there are people in the room that would shock you. It's upsetting to me. So they look like they're on your side, but not really. And I don't know. There could be another reason. I'm not sure. Maybe they wanted to know what I knew, like make sure that their plan worked. I'm not completely sure of all the reasons, but ultimately God had me there. I never went back. I wish I did go back to some other meetings, but I was so disgusted by it. And within 2 months, the health app was downloaded on the iPhones, maybe within a month or so.
They plan on
After,
using that on the politicians first? Your Truth app?
yeah. No, that's right. It should be. Maybe they've got some exemption there. I don't know. They did argue in the meeting about who would monetize off of this. If they would tell the little people about it, or they just do it without their knowing, and that there was an issue with security, it was hackable, but they didn't care.
They're all playing God.
That's what they think. Yeah. And I went to scientific meetings too, where, Craig Ventnor, the father of human genomics, would claim, what is God? God creates. Now we can create. Now we're gods. And he said that. Mhm. So you have to understand these are psychopathic people that believe they're gods. And so you cannot reason with them. I mean, I don't see how you can reason with them.
No.
You guys know this better than I do, but
So talk about the human 2.0 agenda. Is this transhumanism or this kind of control through your phone and all that kind of stuff? Is this part of the human 2. What is it?
there are different gradations. The big transhumanists, though, believe they can play God and claim that they can make humans immortal synthetically. Okay, so eternal life, but also alter the human body to be better in their eyes. So, this is genetic modification, maybe putting different species genes in us to have better abilities, or just, of course, the old eugenics play, right? To create the perfect human by putting different human genetics together. Cloning comes into play with that. But Peter Thiel of Palantir, which Palantir has been approved to run this US now. He and his lover are say that everybody should be androgynous. So it's like a plug and play of what you want to be for the day. So these are the ultimate transhumanists. Okay. So it just means to alter the human body from its organic original creation through synthetic means. And that can be through nanotechnology, the synthetic technology I was talking about. It's like a liquefied computing process, which was part of what I was shown in medical school. And then, or it can be from genetic modification, which is changing the genes around before or after being born, or just some other way. Some people do some modifications in the body, but that's not. They call it, what is it, biohacking, but on a scale that like they put magnets in their fingers and things like that. Yeah.
They're getting the public ready.
So I think it's really comes down to this. So their main synthetic technology they're putting in people without their consent is this hydrogel. Okay, now this is has been found in many substances, not just the shots and other things too. So they need to get enough of it inside the human body. It mimics our tissues enough so that we usually don't reject it, but it does cause problems. But the main thing in it is a biosensor, meaning those are all the different parameters they can measure. They want to know everything about us, but then it's a two-way communication so they can put messages in the body to manipulate our thinking, our behavior, which is what they want, which was that original meeting I went to. They want to manipulate our behavior and our thinking, right? So if any of us here got some of that substance in our body, enough of it, and all of a sudden we get a thought that we know is not ours, we will reject it, right? Because we are bigger than that. We're bigger than our physical body. We know how to deal with that. They have a problem with this. They know that us humans can overcome that. So they were always targeting the young ones, the younger children. That's why they had to do the psychological manipulation on them, because they have broken family homes. They're not sure if they're boys or girls. They're not sure if they're a fox or a dog or a wolf. Do you know right now, I know this for a fact, that in the Navy, that when the transgender was outlawed, overnight, those kids, I call them kids, young men, women, whatever, became furries. Okay, how do you just change overnight like that? And they have mostly in charge of the nuclear subs. So the nuke part. So what I'm trying to say is that's not organic, right? Organically created. How can that happen overnight? They told these people in the Navy that they have a special skill set, and that's why they're necessary to have on the nuke program. That their skills, and there's a lot of foxes too. I asked, well, what kind of animal do you see the most? Foxes. So there must be some, it makes me think, I'm assuming, I'm hypothesizing, are they taking genetic markers or attributes from different species, maybe vaccinating with them? I don't know, but I'm just telling you that's a curious thing to observe like that. And how do you turn something on and turn something off like that? And to use it for a specific part of the military. So that's part of transhumanism. But again, a thinking mind, a person who has an identity and has boundaries and morals and ethics, this stuff's not going to work on them. That's why they were always coming after the young ones, the children, always. And that's why we're seeing the devastation, and you're seeing the devastation in the schools. So that's the mindset behind it.
how did the adults get to this place of manipulating and grooming and facilitating and all that? That's where I get stuck, because there's mental health professionals that think that this is a good idea, gender affirming care.
There's a spiritual aspect to it, I believe that. So, to me, the demonic realm is real. And I think we are being attacked spiritually as well. And people who don't have a strong foundation and truth, absolute truth, or God, they're going to fall for whatever comes their way, or the influences of this world. That's my take on it.
Mhm.
Dr. Madej,
Absolutely, it
very
is.
overwhelming. And the fact that, like, at least in my mind, mental health professionals are pushing this stuff, willing to defy the law here in Texas. I've already gone to one CEU that was trying to tell us how to manipulate your case notes to not be seen. It's all that dark stuff. And these professionals are very adamant
Wow.
that there's nothing wrong with what they're doing, but they kind of know. It's that cognitive dissonance, but it is a spiritual warfare. Talk about that. Like, how can counselors be better with identifying we're in a spiritual warfare?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories similar to what you're saying through friends of mine, and unfortunately, with their kids or grandkids, and teachers and counselors. Yeah. So it seems to be, and more than just Texas for sure. And
Yeah, you're really hitting the ball in terms of, like, now our profession is supporting these sexual perversions as being normal. They're trying to normalize pedophilia. They're trying to normalize all of that and trying to discount the sex trafficking, which is a horrid that not many people know about. I know you know about it. The blood sacrifices. There's a group of professionals that there's some sort of apathy, which is the gateway for people who need to kind of rise up, who should know better, right? And sometimes it's a very lonely walk. Christian counselors who don't want to have anything to do with this. And I'm thinking, well, aren't you aiding and abetting in that way by being, like, pretending it's not coming through their doors? I know it sounds a little bit weird, but I
Yeah, Christians are not called to be inclusive of evil. That just makes you a weak Christian. This stuff, everything we've been talking about this morning, everything is extremely difficult to believe if you don't have a larger spiritual framework to place it all in. From day one, Lucy showed up in the garden, and his intent was to deflect our attention from God. If he can deflect attention from God, then you can be like God. Then your focus is on him, and you'll die and stay there with him forever. That's the total purpose of his being now. And all we're living in right now is the same playbook. It's evil 2000. It's the same playbook. He just has more tools now because as a people, we've gotten smarter. We have medicine and microscopes, and we can create new bugs to kill people 16 different ways now that weren't available thousands of years ago. Yeah. Apathy is a quite a human trait. People won't care until this stuff shows up on their doorstep. Then it might be too late. After last year's conference, Kathleen, the first thing Kathleen did was she come to me and she said, "I want Carrie Madej next year at our Friday night dinner. I want her to speak to that." Okay. Okay, so that was the first thing we did. And so October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd is our next annual conference, a fourth annual conference here in 2026. And yes, Dr. Carrie Madej will be the featured speaker at our Thursday or Friday night dinner. We're going to a 3-day motif this year. We're going to cram 2 days worth of material into 3 days just to spread it out a little bit. So we're very much looking forward to having you there, Carrie, for that. It'll be good. And the link for information about the conference and getting your ticket is in the show notes. Anyway, there's a page on our website called the Austin BBQ Club because we typically drive to Austin and back to make our presentations in person, and then we go have barbecue when we're done. And if you'd like to come with us, the information is on that page. And thank you, everybody out there, for carving out another hour of your week to be with us. We appreciate it very much, and we need you to be good.